Hello, this is Dr. Jan Bravo, and I'm here with Dr. Ted Loder.
Hello, good afternoon.
And we are going to discuss today how to set up a CSETI working group. So it's best to start from the beginning with the basic philosophy. And the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence, CSETI, is an international nonprofit scientific and diplomatic research organization that is dedicated to investigating extraterrestrial intelligence and civilizations. It was founded in 1990 by Dr. Stephen Greer, and the information that we present here is directly a result of his extensive research. After a thorough review of existing evidence about unidentified flying objects, CSETI believes that Earth is being regularly visited by extraterrestrial intelligence with non-hostile intent. And the ultimate goal of CSETI is to establish mutually sustainable relationships with extraterrestrial intelligence through peaceful, systematic means and the goodwill of global citizens. There is not really a group on the planet at this point, certainly through government, that is doing this, or even through the United Nations. So we feel that it's important that someone take the time and effort in a coordinated way, and we believe, being citizens of Earth, that it's our obligation to do this in a really focused way, and a way, again, that will promote sustainable, good relationships with any visitors, right?
Part of that focus, if I can add in here, Jan, is that part of the focus is the intent. And we can get into that a little later, but a positive, non-threatening, for the right reasons intent is one of the critical issues in doing our work. But continue. Absolutely.
Okay, so in order to establish our mission between all human beings and any and all extraterrestrials, CSETI has developed a system of research-driven communication protocols and public education programs. And the principal research platform is the CE5, that is Close Encounter of the Fifth Kind initiative. And in a moment, I'll go into explain that a little more. But it does involve scientists, investigators, and others who voluntarily initiate human contact and or interaction between extraterrestrial spacecraft and their occupants. CE5s are active, real-time research activities conducted on-site by trained working group members using scientific and diplomatic methods to establish a non-aggressive and evolutionary relationship between humans and extraterrestrial peoples. And CSETI uses three specific contact methods, and these include, one, visual, which is high-powered lights, lasers, and visual ground formations, which convey, which can convey information as to our location and intent to our visitors. Number two, sound, specific auditory tones, which have been recorded at previous UFO sightings and close encounters. And three, coherent thought sequencing, and that's a consciousness visualization technique employed by working group members to enhance the CE5 setting and the research staging area, and we'll explain that a little more in a minute. I think at this point it's important to explain a few terms. We talk about CE5. Let's start with a CE1, a close encounter of the first kind. That's defined as an observation of a UFO within 500 feet. A close encounter of the second kind is trace evidence of either a landing or a radar lock-on. A close encounter of the third kind is observation of humanoids, usually associated with UFO activity.
Made famous by the movie, of course, by Steven Spielberg.
Right. A close encounter of the fourth kind is interaction with humanoids, usually aboard a UFO. And what we do is a close encounter of the fifth kind, a CE5, that is human-initiated contact or interaction with extraterrestrial intelligence or beings. Okay. Ted, you mentioned something about intent, and I think this is a good point to mention some qualities and actually code of ethics that are important for CSETI researchers. A few things that are very important to mention. And these are just some of the more important qualities. One is for those doing this work to be free of the prejudices and myths and fears which abound in human society regarding extraterrestrial intelligence. It's also important to be open-minded to the vast array of possibilities when dealing with advanced extraterrestrial technology and mind-matter interactions and other extraordinary manifestations of extraterrestrial civilizations. It's necessary to refrain from hasty judgment and to be objective and with a pure heart to observe the reality of things so that the truth may unfold, unimpeded by premature conclusions and prejudices.
I mean, after all, if you think about it, if you sit back and think about it for a minute or a couple of minutes or so, you realize that any civilization who is interplanetary, interstellar, or intergalactic perhaps, but at least interstellar, is going to appear to us, in a very different way, or you communicate in a different way than you and I might sit around the coffee table or the water cooler. And so you have to be pretty open-minded about other possibilities that you might even not have a clue about until they happened. I mean, but continue on. So that's part of the open-mindedness. Absolutely. That just be cognizant of the differences of things and peoples.
Agreed. And our goal is to engage in actions that will benefit the Earth and all the Earth people, and ultimately all the advancement of all life in the universe. And through these interactions, we hope to grow as a universal citizen, diplomat, and emissary to all intelligent life forms in the universe. So as you said, Ted, it's important to respect and accept both the oneness and diversity of not only the people one's working with, one's team members, but humanity and other life forms in the universe. And along the lines of something else you said, it's important to be open to remotely viewed information that we get, but also to reality check this with the objective world and with other team members' experiences. And so that is to value the information that we acquire, but to refrain from absolute acceptance as fact until such information is verified. Now, the prejudices we tend to have about how communication happens, that it will be through, with another civilization perhaps, that it will be through a microwave or radio wave or TV or through a voice or conversation, needs to be tempered by the fact that these extraterrestrial civilizations appear to have technologies that interface with consciousness or mind and thought. It may be more likely that they'll interface in that fashion rather than through microwave signals or telephone call or radio wave. And so for this reason, the CSETI research teams, given the fact that there's abundant empirical evidence that these life forms are interfacing with mind and thought, use this extensively and are prepared to use it in any communication that may occur, even when an object is in close proximity to us. It's even more important to utilize these principles when the object is at some remote distance in deep space and has been detected by the team. But even when it's in close proximity, and perhaps even when a personal encounter is going on, the likelihood is that the communications could take place in ways that are frankly unconventional to our way of thinking of communications. It should be recognized that civilizations which have traveled through interstellar space and which therefore are communicating back to their home planets through interstellar distances will not be using the electromagnetic spectrum. It's too slow. No one can afford to take 200 years to call back home. So for this reason, it's almost a requirement of starfaring civilizations that they have evolved transluminal technologies, that is, technologies which bypass or go past the barrier of the speed of light. The most effective and powerful technology in that regard is consciousness or mind, because thought is not bound by the speed of light. In fact, a bit of information can be received before it is sent simply because mind on its non-local or non-linear basis is escaping not only the constraints of space but also the barrier of time. For this reason, even though it's admittedly controversial and perhaps on the cutting edge of what's considered acceptable research protocol by some, the CSETI research teams are utilizing in an active way nonlinear technologies using mind and thought and the expanded spectrum of consciousness known as non-local mind or universal mind. These are being used both in advance of a research expedition as one prepares and during a research expedition in various ways. A discussion of this coherent thought sequencing, as it's termed, cannot occur without having a firm grasp of the nature of the non-local or non-linear universe. It appears that these extraterrestrial spacecraft have ongoing technological systems able to receive communication input from thought alone. CSETI has put together the concept of a team coherent thought sequencing, wherein the entire team experiences a silent state of mind, which has been called nonlinear or non-local, and while in that state begin to engage in a series of coherent, sequenced projections to guide a spacecraft from space or from some distant point to the research site. Once that state of consciousness is established, after a number of minutes of silence, the team then engages quietly in the coherent thought sequencing itself. The coherent thought sequencing actually begins once that state of nonlinear mind is accessed. The coherent thought sequencing then enables the individual through the facility of non-local mind to remote view distant areas in deep space. And in the event they're able to see an extraterrestrial spacecraft or life form, to then convey directly to that spacecraft and to the occupants the location of the team as follows. The individuals show visually through non-local mind. This is actually not a visualization, but an actual remote view showing the galaxy known as the Milky Way, and then the solar system where our sun and planets are located. Then they zoom in on the planet Earth, and then to the continent where the research team is located, then the region of the continent, and then the precise area. This is most effective if it's not done through just visualization, but actually remote viewing it. In other words, the individual, while silently in a state of non-local mind, is actively viewing deep space in these spacecraft and are then showing these spacecraft and their occupants exactly where on the planet they're located to within a few meters of the team. This is done repeatedly over a number of hours while other members of the team may be using high-powered lights and projecting their tones into space, both in an auditory way and over radio signals. It's admittedly an unusual approach, but it has worked. We suggest to people to look at this with an open mind and consider the fact that if these life forms utilize thought as easily as we utilize microwaves or radio waves, and it appears this is the case, that this type of approach would be very effective. When encountering an entirely different culture for the first time with different customs, mores, and different ethics, it's important not to impose our ethnocentric judgments on alleged action by the extraterrestrials. This is what you just said, Ted, and this is extremely important. Recall when the Europeans came over and encountered indigenous people in North America and Africa. These people of color had different customs, forms of social organization, and therefore were labeled as evil. This went so far as even during the 17th and 18th centuries, Europeans officially, by church and crown, did not even consider indigenous peoples to be human, since they felt they didn't have a soul according to this ethnocentric judgment. Then they could rationalize that they could conquer tribal people and enslave them, and they did. In the case of Native Americans in this country, their near total extermination was similarly justified. We should be very careful that we don't make the same kind of mistakes.
Or somebody else doesn't make the same mistakes on us, considering that we're the less technologically advanced than any group of conscious beings who are traveling through the universe. So suddenly things cut both ways, and it's really important to open the mind and consider all aspects of what we're doing here.
That's
But
right.
go on, Jan. Excellent.
Yeah, we must not misinterpret the actions of civilizations that evolved on other planets under very different circumstances. These civilizations are likely to have different, all sorts of different cultural customs, and it would be a mistake to prejudge them. If we make the mistake of approaching them with prejudice, as we've done so often on this planet, among humanity, it will be a very big mistake. So we have to be careful about this and be very deliberate and diligent in not jumping to conclusions. So those are basically some of the ideas of how we approach, some of our philosophy. Now, as far as a working group, the makeup of the working group, usually they begin with about 3 to 5 people in your area that you know that you wish to work with. Of course, working groups can get very large, but 3 to 5 is a good number. It's a good number to start with. Each person in the group has some sort of task which adds to the team nature of the group. There should be a coordinator who facilitates group activities, leads when necessary, and basically helps guide the evening's work. There should definitely be a documentation specialist, someone to record all the activities and findings. We find it's very helpful to have a continual digital recording going, because we can record the discussion of the group when things are happening, how people feel about it, and what we're getting, and then this can be transcribed later. There should be an equipment specialist, someone manning cameras. We have telescopes, digital cameras, regular cameras. There's a list on the CSETI side of different sorts of equipment that's helpful, and we'll go into that a little more later. And then another person always will act as security specialist. This is a private group. Any visitors or curiosity seekers who are approached, the security specialist can be in charge of the safety of the site. And we'll mention more about that later. We always have a buddy system, because usually this is in the dark, out in the open, and it's better not to wander off alone. Also, importantly, if a close encounter does occur, a team member may find that they are not psychologically ready to participate, so it's helpful to have someone be with that person. No one should be left alone in that situation. And it's always good to have someone keeping track of you if you go out into the field to use the quote facilities. So again, we're working as a team to do this work. We will get to our contact protocols, but honestly, the most important part of these contact protocols is the question: why are you out here doing this work? And the answer to that question lies in the heart of every person doing it. Your true motivations are the most important aspect of this work. This is absolutely transcendent. This is a major issue in whether or not you'll have a successful attempt to establish contact.
And this has to do with the intent issue that we talked about sort of at the beginning of this discussion. And I'm always reminded, if I can pop in here with a little story, I'm reminded of we had a gentleman working with the CSETI group many, many years ago, back in the late 90s. And he was going to do all kinds of things and what have you, but he later told a friend that his intent, now here's the intent issue, the reason he was doing this was that his intent was to get the secret of anti-gravity so he could become the next Rockefeller or the next gazillionaire on the planet. So his intent wasn't to have peaceful communication between intelligent races from different worlds, if you will, in the sort of the brotherhood of consciousness peoples all over the universe, but really was for his own self-aggrandizement and his own selfish motives. You know what? When he was out in the field, he never saw anything. He was always looking the wrong way, and suddenly, after being out with the group for a couple of days, he kind of got sick and didn't feel well and ended up going home. So his intent of why he was there was coming from the wrong place. And somehow, I don't know how it happens, and maybe it doesn't always happen, but the universe seemed to take care of somebody with that intent, and he ended up leaving. And so he was there for the wrong reason. So it's really important that you look at the reasons why you're there, and that's what Jan is bringing up now. But go ahead, Jan.
Well, along those lines, I understand there was a great deal of activity after he left.
Well, yeah, there was. And while he was there, but he was never looking the right direction, and he was off in the bushes or whatever else. But which is kind of humorous in a sad sort of way.
Yeah. And as a reminder, these protocols have to do with building relations that are mutually beneficial and cooperative and therefore sustainable. If any extraterrestrial civilization senses that the motives animating any given working group are selfish and greedy, then things often won't happen. Now, as far as preparing for field work, one of the most important things is site selection. As they say in real estate, location, location, location.
Mm-hmm.
Key features in selecting a site are as follows. 1 is privacy. 2 is an absence of nearby ambient light.
Street lights, whatever.
Yeah.
Shopping malls.
Yeah. 3, it's helpful to be hidden from public roads and houses so that there won't be the light pollution nor the noise pollution, and also as a safety issue. 4, it should be a place that's accessible even while carrying field gear, that people can walk in at night safely. And then there should be a view of the sky and the horizons. And it's helpful if it's a flat area because people, as mentioned, will be walking in the dark. You'll have flashlights, but you want it to be a safe area.
I might add, if I can pop in here again, maybe you're going to touch this, Jan, but one of the things about field sites that is really important to do is to, if you go around your neighborhood or the region you live in and find a place that looks like it might be a good place, at least during some of your earlier work, it's really good to be there either during the day or sort of in the early evening so you can see what's around you, see that there's a house in the distance that's sort of in the woods that during daylight, so that if at night you're out there and suddenly this light goes on in the woods, you say, oh, that's that house, not some sort of close encounter event. So it's really good to understand your location and understand what is out there, and then sort of keep track of the evening, if you will, if you go out there, and what's going on in different places, where there are houses, even if they're in the distance, or where are you on a landing pattern for the local airport, and which way's the wind blowing, so you know that the planes are coming over you tonight, but other nights they don't, because you can often be fooled by airplane landing lights coming directly at you, thinking, oh my God, this is something or other, until you see the red and green navigation lights. So understanding your site, at least for long-term work, is really important and pays a lot of dividends in the long run. Go ahead.
Good point. And probably the first choice would be if someone has some private land where the owner gives you knowledge, the owner has knowledge and gives you permission to use it. But just be sure it's somewhere that you can be safely. It's important that everyone in the working group keeps the location of the site confidential because it's not really, a party for everyone to come to. It's serious. It's important. It can be great fun, too, but sometimes people will hoax, lights and events around you. So it's important to, as I say, not be secret, but just have it confidential when you go out and keep it among the people who are going, who have the same goals that you do in going out. It's important to plan ahead that you have a low impact on the chosen site, so you want a carpool. Perhaps meet at some rendezvous place where you can safely and legally keep most of your cars, and then take as few cars to the site, so you'll impact the site less. Next,
with a small working group of 4 to 6 or 8, you should be able to do that with 1 or 2 cars without any problem, even with field gear and chairs and the stuff.
Right. And speaking of field gear, let's start with clothing. Dress for the weather. My first CSETI conference was in Hawaii, and I was coming from California. We were at the highest point on the Big Island on a mountain, and let's just say that I learned a lot from that first trip. I did not layer. Take layers. You can always take layers off, but if you get cold and are uncomfortable, it's very difficult to concentrate on the work you're doing. So dress for whatever the weather is. You can get a weather report and find that out ahead of time. Take something to cover the ground, like a tarp or a blanket, and a camp chair. You might take a small rain poncho, one of those plastic ones if you feel it's going to rain, and something for your head, some sort of cap and gloves, and then basically some layers as needed.
I might add a couple of comments on here is that I remember one of my first trips, I thought I was just going to sit on the ground on a tarp. Well, you know, that's all very well and good if you're sitting around the campfire for 20 minutes or something, but if you're going to be sitting outside in the field under the stars for a number of hours, sitting on the ground just does not work. Your back gives up, and it's just rather uncomfortable. So some kind of a folding chair or a resin chair, one of the cheap resin chairs or a folding chair, work pretty well for most field work. And besides that, in some cases, the tarps that you might have sitting on the ground are particularly the plastic, the blue ones or whatever, are noisy. So every time you move around on it, it's like you're crinkling wax paper or cellophane. And that's disturbing and sort of annoying to other people in the group, particularly if you're doing some meditation or doing some contact CE5 work. So years of experience, and as Jan has said, layering is truly critical. It may be 50 degrees may sound quite warm if you're going for a walk or whatever else, but 50 degrees and a slight wind can be really cold if you're just sitting still for an hour or two for a time period. And I know some people will bring a blanket or just a sleeping bag to sort of lay over themselves, not crawl into it. Too often if you crawl into a sleeping bag, you get nice and toasty warm and you just fall asleep, and that's it. But it just as a cover for your legs or whatever else. But if you're sitting there chattering, it's really hard to focus on anything but chattering. So
that's true. All good points. Thank you. As far as equipment, now that we're on equipment, groups should have some sort of lights, and often people bring. We used to have more of the high-powered halogen lights. Now, green lasers are very popular and very helpful. And I believe, Ted, there's a place on the site.
There's what?
I believe there's a place on the CSETI site that mentions where one might get a laser.
Yes, there are. There's several sites listed there, and you can do a web search on Google or Yahoo or whatever, and find a number of places that sell astronomy lasers. For large groups, the 5 milliwatt ones are not adequate, and they aren't powerful enough for a large group. For a small group of just 4 or 5 people, they usually are adequate, and they're relatively inexpensive. So lasers are good. The big 500,000 candle power lights we used to use because lasers weren't available, or they too expensive, but they're bulky and they're so bright they blind everybody when they go on. So the lasers are a much nicer tool to use. One other thing, while we're on, if I could pop in again, there's still flashlights. We find that if you're experiencing your field site, you can actually go into the field site and set up your equipment basically in the dark without even using a flashlight. Although we find that the little hang on your keychain type lights, the little LED lights in red, particularly do not harm your night vision. They allow you to see things just enough to see and move around without blinding other people. So small LED flashlights are sort of the best thing instead of the high-powered flashlights.
Good point, yeah.
Go ahead, Jen.
Moving on, binoculars are indispensable. A lot of people use stabilizing binoculars, and these are excellent. Night vision binoculars are very useful. It's amazing how much can be seen utilizing a night scope. In fact, we have a night scope that's attached to video camera and have gotten some remarkable footage. So if you do have night vision binoculars, you're going to find those are very helpful.
The binoculars, let me explain how you might be using thing. Mainly it has to do with identification of what's that light over there in the sky coming toward the group. Well, everybody looks at it. It happens to be an airplane with landing lights, but you can't see the landing lights when you can't see the navigation lights, the red and green lights, because the landing lights are so bright. However, a good pair of binoculars will allow you to say, oh, I can see the nav lights, and say it's an airplane coming to the local airport, and then you just discard that as ancient Earth technology, and you move on to trying to observe other things. So the binoculars are a very useful tool in identifying and sorting out various phenomena, whether it's ET related or whether it is just human related.
Good point. Another device that it's good to have is a radar detector. Many people have these radar detectors in their car. And the interesting thing is we have been out in places where there has been nothing to set off a radar detector, and all of a sudden they go off. And we found that we need to be very alert when that happens, because it's our sense that it's picking up an electromagnetic disturbance, possibly caused by the near presence of an extraterrestrial spaceship. And in fact, we've seen activity after these have gone off. Further, we have been in remote places with more than one of these in a group, essentially side by side, but only one of them would go off at a time. Now that is routinely, in conventional terms, wouldn't you say, Ted, that's unexplainable?
Yes, and the interesting thing in that particular incident, two different radar detectors, two different brands, but within 10 feet of each other or 5, 6 feet of each other. One would go off, then the other would go off, and they would switch. They would flop back and forth, and we're sitting out in the middle of a national park or a national forest or parklands where there was nobody within miles of us that we were aware of, miles from the nearest road other than the road we came in on. And it was quite amazing, actually. Right.
We have that recorded. That was wonderful. Other things to bring are a tape, CD or DVD player. We have, you can get from the site the CSETI tones. Now, these are anomalous tones that have been recorded from several sources, some in crop circles in England, or where there was evidence of landings in the United States and Canada and other places. And what we do is we play these signals back out.
Using a small hand transmitter, one of the family radio type transmitters or walkie-talkies or whatever else. So we broadcast back out into space, if you will, these same tones that were recorded by TV crews in England in a crop circle and what have you. So they're basically extraterrestrial tones.
Yeah. They're wonderful, actually. Another thing to do, you might want to, as Ted said, it's a good idea to reconnoiter the area during the day and find out where there are houses in the distance or roadways. You might want to get a map of the area, but if it's a hilly or mountainous area, you want to see, again, if there are any homes or roads or other places, because sometimes you'll see a light on the side of a mountain, and if it's a road up there, it could easily be a car, but you wouldn't have known that if you hadn't checked it out. So that's something you may want to do ahead of time for wherever you go.
For the really clever people and who have internet accessibility, which is pretty much universal these days, getting a map or a chart, I should say, of satellite crossings can be extremely valuable. There are maps and websites, and I believe it's on the CSETI website. At least it was.
Actually, it's www.heavens-above.com.
Say it again, Jen.
www.heavens-above.com.
And what you can do is you can go to that website, put in the latitude and longitude where you're going to be located, and the date, and the sort of the evening period, which is when you see the most satellites, and then print out a list of satellite crossings, or the bright ones above a certain magnitude, so that if you're sitting there and this brilliant light sort of just goes over you at 9:47, you can check your chart and you find out at 9:47 there's supposed to be a so-and-so satellite crossing you from east to west or north to south or whatever. And so you say, okay, that's probably a satellite, probably not an ET craft. So it gives you some way to sort of, once again, check out, confirm that it is anomalous or confirm that it's a more prosaic event.
Right. Okay. Now, as far as real-time research and doing the field work, prior to leaving for field work, it's important to begin mentally preparing for the work of contact. So it's a good idea to relax and just mentally reach out and invite the extraterrestrials to visit if they have the time and if it's safe for them to do so. As far as getting to the site, it's good for everyone to be punctual and meet, and we mentioned carpooling. We also talked about the buddy system. So upon arriving at the site, it's important to buddy up, and then people can also, this may have been done beforehand, but designate who's going to be the security specialist, who's going to be documenting, who's going to be basically leading the group. And as a team arrives, you should set up in a circle. This way you can see all of the four directions, and then, of course, the zenith of the sky is watched as well. If you want to look in a circle, you can volunteer to look in a particular direction, but all the directions need to be covered. And as the team settles in, there's going to be visiting and chit-chatting, and then after a while that'll run its course. By the time the first coherent thought sequencing is undertaken, the team should have assumed a silent and a watchful attitude. Now, as far as doing the field work, it's important to be aware with all your senses. Everything that happens might not come from up in the sky. Watch your environment for subtle changes in energy, for unexplained sounds that might move around the group. Often there's a change in a temperature. Everyone can feel that suddenly it's gotten very warm or conversely very cold very quickly, and sometimes the wind direction will change suddenly. And as these things come up and you experience any of these things, share them with the group, because it means that something important may be going on. And it also means that it can confirm something that each member is finding, because you can spend a lot of time wondering if it's happening, but if someone else can confirm it, that's very helpful. Right, Ted?
Absolutely. We did, there's so many different phenomena. I mean, the ideal thing would be to have a giant disc fly over your head and park there. But in reality, that doesn't happen. At least it doesn't happen typically. And so the showing, if you will, or ET contact information or contact events are typically much more subtle, very much more subtle. And as Jan said, you may be sitting out in the desert, as I said, or somewhere, and there may be high-pitched tones that go through the group. Sometimes it's as though a bee went from one side to the other of the group, but it's an electronic tone, not a bee. Sometimes there'll be flashes of light right over the group, like a lightning bolt going off right above you, but it's a totally clear sky and there's not a cloud anywhere. And it's the middle of the night in the middle of nowhere. And so we've seen that phenomena. Other times you'll just see small pulses in the sky as though the stars were flashing at you, but they'll wink back and forth, and you shine a laser at it, they'll flash back at you. We've seen that phenomena with multiple craft in the sky in the same area for over an hour in some cases, just flashing back and forth. Meanwhile, the stars are moving on, and this is just flashing at us. So there's a multiple phenomena that occur. And so you have to sort of, and people sometimes smell flower odors or other odors, again, in the middle of nowhere where you wouldn't expect that sort of thing. So both smell, sight, hearing, touch. Members of the group have sometimes been touched when there's nobody walking around, and yet they've been touched on the shoulder by an ET who's only partially materialized. Linda Willits and I, a number of weeks, several months ago actually, did a whole show on just the phenomena, the phenomenological events that occur during CSETI contact events. So I'll let you go on, Jan, but I just thought I'd throw those things out.
No, that's very helpful.
All
very
senses
important.
open.
Now, the next thing that I'm going to say is probably the most difficult for many people beginning, including myself, when I started. It's important to let go of a strong desire for results. It's always exciting to see a light that behaves in an intelligent manner or a craft in the sky, but the process is the key element to CSETI field work. We're preparing ourselves to communicate with extraterrestrials and allowing ourselves to be observed. So the preparatory work being done by field teams may be more important than we think. By going into the field on a regular basis, by showing our intent, obviously showing we have no drugs or weapons and are not acting aggressively, our motives will become known to those from other worlds who may be observing. So it's important to never feel that your field work is in vain, even if nothing is seen in the sky. Every member of every team makes an impact every time that field work is done, and sometimes the subtle efforts produce the strongest results. And please note that to our knowledge, no CSETI member has ever reported an abduction in connection with doing the field work.
Absolutely not. Yes, I've never had any fear of any of that when we've been out in the field. We've had some amazing things happen to us in sort of contact type things.
Yeah. Now, the CSETI contact trilogy consists of, as mentioned at the beginning of the broadcast, 1, tones, 2, lights, and 3, thoughts. As far as the tones, we mentioned playing the tape or CD of the crop circle or ET tones on the boom box. As far as lights, you use your laser light to signal the location of the team. Now, this shouldn't be done in a chaotic manner. If everyone's shooting lights all over the sky, that's rather chaotic. That's like having several televisions screaming at you at once. There should be some coordination. You want to use the lights to signal at something also that appears to not be a conventional aircraft. If you get a return signal, then keep signaling to it. It's important not to shine the laser light on any craft or perceived object in the sky or at group members. One, it can blind people if you shine this right in their eye. So that's why that is not done. As far as shining these lasers, some of them are very powerful, and they have been known to hit and disorient aircraft pilots, and it is an FAA regulation problem. If an aircraft is hit, they will come find out and search for who did it, and rightfully so. So you want to signal in front of an object, behind an object, or you can even circle an object to get people's attention there or to get the attention of the object. So just be careful with the lasers because they are they can harm. They're not intrinsically harmful, but if used wrong, they can be a problem. Now, the third leg of that trilogy of contact is thought. This, as mentioned, the CSETI Coherent Thought Sequencing Protocol, and it's a proven, effective method of connecting with extraterrestrial intelligence. Before the coherent thought sequencing is actually done, the team should spend some time in silence and meditation in order to reach a state of unbounded mind and expanded awareness. Then the coherent thought sequencing is done, and it can be led verbally by the coordinator or another team member, or it can be done silently. It's usually helpful for most team members, especially when the team is new, to do the first CTS of the night in a verbally guided fashion. Mm-hmm. While this is happening, though, so it's very helpful for someone to watch the sky, because often things happen then. If something important happens, then that person can alert the group, because often people's eyes are closed because it's a rather meditative, focused activity. As far as ending the field work, if it gets late, if people get tired, if the weather gets severe, then the team may decide to end the field session. It's important to spend a bit of time debriefing, and each team member should be encouraged to share what they experienced during the course of the evening.
That's really important. That's really. I'm going to emphasize that a second here. If a typical evening, as Jenna said, of initial talking and getting yourself adjusted, observing the sky, observing where houses are, and that sort of monkey mind. What's our site like? And then people spend some quiet time, and then go into a meditative period. But often during a meditative period during the evening, before or after the CTS, the coherent thought sequencing, people will get sort of, shouldn't call them visions, they aren't visions, but will get visual images or pictures or contact information that if they share it with the others in the group soon after it's happened, other people may have pieces of that same set of information. For example, somebody might get a sense that something's going to happen around 11 o'clock at night at their site. There might be some event happening, and so somebody else may say, well, gee, I get the same sense as well. So by sharing what you're thinking, experiencing, visualizing, it enhances the group's ability to be observant and understand what's going on. So that's a very important part of the whole process. And we will, in the evening, we'll go on. There are periods of the CTS, the quiet periods, and then there's a quiet discussion among the people in the group about what they're seeing, whatever else, and then you go back and do that again. So it's a in and out, if you will. So, just some thoughts.
Actually, that's great. Along those lines, people often find that there's an increase in dreams and/or anomalous events once they begin participating in the work of inviting contact, and team members are encouraged to share that with each other, both at fieldwork events and between the fieldwork. And the more you work together, the more you're likely to share, to experience shared dreams or experiences of ET contact. And insight and understanding of the events are heightened by speaking with others who are present of your dream or experience and getting their feedback. Mm-hmm. And often people find their dreams are especially active on the nights before and after a field event. And as we're more approachable and less subconsciously defensive during the sleep state, contact can take place more easily at that time.
Correct.
The most effective tool that each team member possesses to enhance the chances of contact is to continue with a regular meditation practice. Our common ground with extraterrestrial intelligence is the consciousness that we share. It's our link. So by regularly going into a state of heightened awareness and unbounded mind, our intent for communication will be known and will be answered. So it's important to be patient and to be persistent.
Mm-hmm.
The person who is, as far as fieldwork, the person who is documented on a digital recorder should transcribe the reports, because the important thing about documenting them while events are happening is that often in time after that, even within a few minutes, details can be lost. So if you go back and check the transcription, then you can bring back a lot more particulars of what happened. And often if you're noting something, you can go back, if you don't have that Heavens Above satellite chart, and check to see if a satellite came at 10:47 p.m. or the space station or something like that. So it's very helpful to have a digital recorder. Now, as far as unidentified flying objects, when an object streaks across the sky at great speed, you'll only have a few seconds to determine if it's a conventional aircraft, a satellite, or something else. Do not automatically assume that an airborne object is an airplane, satellite, or shooting star. Spacecraft that enter the Earth's atmosphere and approach close enough to be observed are taking a risk to do so. And we all know the stories of spacecraft that have been shot down or have crashed. So be aware that extraterrestrial people are actually risking sacrifice to come close enough to interact with you. They often will mask their craft as something more conventional looking in order to avoid attracting a lot of attention, either visually or on radar. rather than calling an airborne object an alleged UFO, we prefer to call it an alleged aircraft or alleged satellite or shooting star. What happens when you see something come into your line of sight is send thoughts to it the instant it's seen, and then ask it to do something to indicate that it's not an airplane. If it continues to exhibit characteristics not consistent with conventional aircraft, signal to it. Use your lights, use your laser, observe it with binoculars, and focus attention on it. Often it will turn out to be something terrestrial, but many times it will turn out to be something unknown as well. So continue vectoring the object with thoughts and light until it either A, disappears, or B, displays definite signs of being conventional, or C, signals back. If it signals back, then the entire team should be focused in thought on that object, alert everyone, and invite it to come closer and to interact in any way that's safe for it to do so. You can project thoughts of welcome, safety, integrity of intent, and kindness. A little more on the concept of working as a team. Again, giving up individual ideas and agendas and working as a unit in the field is the most difficult concept for most team members to grasp initially. It'll take work for the team to unify and to work as a whole. It takes time to lay aside the excessive chit-chat and non-related conversation and focus on the field work, but it helps if you approach the work as a scientific lab experiment using the concept of conscious communication to vector in and contact the extraterrestrials. Each part forms the whole, and it's the work of the whole that's important here. We're asking for wide-awake, multiply witnessed encounters, and that takes concentration. To remain in a state of expanded awareness takes practice, and all of the protocols are works in progress, so work with them and amend them to fit what works best for your team.
I'd like to add a comment, maybe interject a real quick thought. People might ask if they're ETs and they know we're down here, why do you need a spotlight or a laser or whatever else to show people where they are? Well, in reality, the ETs might be picking up your initial coherent thought sequencing, but it may be like trying to read a map in the dark, if you will. They might not be able to see or pick up exactly where your team is, because your team may just be reading and not sending out the total details of where you are. So whereas they might know that you're on the west side of the mountain, they might not know that you're in the field over there in the corner underneath the trees or beside the trees. So by signaling, basically you're saying this is where we are, when you get down to the very local thing. Anyway,
good
some
point.
thoughts.
Excellent. Actually, extending that, we talk about coherent thought sequencing, and Dr. Greer has actually established these protocols, developed them, and he discusses nonlinear mind and coherent thought sequencing extensively. And the actual nature of mind, regardless of how we understand it, is that it's beyond space and time. Therefore, it's omnipresent and eternal. And this is the fundamental aspect of the existence of every intelligent life form. And by becoming aware of awareness, becoming conscious of the depths of silent consciousness, an individual can access this nonlinear, non-bounded aspect of themselves. And mind is at all times in that state, even when we're awake or we're asleep or we're dreaming. If we're thinking of a task, then those thoughts which we're absorbed in are actually taking place within a silent mind that perceives those thoughts. If we're hearing sounds, the sounds are being perceived by an awareness, a silent consciousness which is transcendental to those sounds and which is silent and unbounded. So mind, therefore, is in its essential nature a singularity. It's not a divisible reality. They're not pieces of mind functioning in different individuals. There are, however, unique individuals which share this oneness of mind, and that's what is being accessed. So awakeness, pure consciousness, pure conscious intelligence, pure spirit, it's called many things, is this aspect of every conscious, self-aware, intelligent life form, which is the gateway to the non-linear universe. And by
whether that life form is from Earth or from other planet.
Right. And by recognizing this non-local nature, the non-linear, unbounded nature of mind, and experiencing that, one can perceive anything, anywhere, at any point in time or space. And this is the basis for so-called remote viewing. And it's also the basis for telepathy, precognition, and precognitive dreams. And I think most everyone has had some sort of precognitive information, or certainly knows someone who has. So it's certainly not uncommon. And in the event of, in these precognitive states, they can take place because an individual is accessing mind, and since mind in its pure form is not bound by space or time, one can perceive an event in the future, or at a distance, or in the current state of time that we call now, or in the past, because mind is really independent of space or time.
It reminds me of the great statement by Edward Schrödinger. Do you want to remind the listeners of that?
Oh, go ahead. It's yours.
Oh, there is only one mind in the universe.
Yes, and this
said.
This from a physicist. This is excellent. So in this way, you can be sitting in your house and be able to perceive an event taking place in another city, or on another part of the Earth, or in another part of the solar system, or in another part of the galaxy. Moreover, this can take place at any point on the spectrum of time. The important thing to remember is that the experience of mind is continual. And at first that may be difficult for some people because of various distractions to be able to really get their minds around, but with practice, the ability to be aware of this awareness grows and becomes actually easier and more automatic, and can be utilized either in meditation or while waking or sleeping or dreaming. Now, the significance to this, as it pertains to extraterrestrial life forms, is that just as humans are awake, these other intelligent life forms are also conscious or awake. And as mentioned earlier, the total number of minds in the universe is one.
There we go.
This also means
the correct quote.
This also means that the light of awakeness itself, which is shining through you and through every human, is also shining through and illuminating every extraterrestrial life form. In this way, we understand that we are really all one people, that there is one mind shining through all of us. And some people have likened this to there being one spirit in many bodies, that there is one awakeness which illuminates us all. Now, this becomes significant in terms of a research tool with the CE5 initiative, because these extraterrestrial life forms which have found their way to our corner of the galaxy are not only awake even as you and I are awake, but they've evolved technologies which assist their ability to interface with consciousness or mind. By virtue of being starfaring peoples, they're able to move and communicate beyond the light speed or the barrier of light, and in transcending the barrier of light have come discoveries that involve the interface between technology or machine and consciousness. This has been called consciousness-assisted technology and technology-assisted consciousness. So importantly, from a research point of view, this means that these spacecraft and their occupants are able to interact with mind and thought as easily as we pick up a telephone and speak over electromagnetic energy waves or radio waves or microwave signals. The ability to interface with thought, directed thought, which is emanating from a source of non-locality, is very specific in their technology. The important point here, unless their spacecraft is within line sight of where you're located, is that the individual attempting to establish a point of communication with these extraterrestrial spacecraft is that they can access the non-locality, they access nonlinear mind, this holographic aspect of mind which is beyond time and space. And so then, operating from that level, if we have specific thought sequences, we can direct these spacecraft to our location. So we call this coherent thought sequencing. That's the ability to, from a coherent state of nonlinear mind, to sequentially, in the way of thought, show the extraterrestrial life forms and their spacecraft where you're located on the planet, which solar system, and in fact in which galaxy. The efficacy of that technique, coherent sequencing, is directly proportional to the ability of the individual and the group of the individuals to access and function within this holographic aspect of mind or nonlinear mind, that mind that's beyond space-time or transcendent to the normal boundaries of space-time. And again, the more you work together, the more you work individually to meditate, to develop this, the easier it becomes. And the more a group works on this as a group, the more cohesive and easier for the group to aspect this.
And that should be, we're just about out of time, I think. That should certainly be enough food for thought for people, and a really good introduction to what the CSETI protocols are about and why we do them and how they function. Anything else to add, Jan?
Just, we welcome you to visit the website to get any more information. Contact us if you have any questions. And also, we'd love to hear about your experiences out in the field. And so thank you very much, Ted, for being with me today.
My pleasure, Jan. Thank you.
And have a wonderful day to everyone.
And for the World Pruja Network, listen to us again.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.